Greetings, Corpse Clubbers, and welcome to another episode of Corpse Club Horror BFFs. I am one of your horror BFFs, Patrick Bromley, joined as always by my horror BFF, Heather Wixson. Hi, Heather.
Hello.
We're has
back.
Been Horror Month all month long at Daily Dead, and we have decided to wrap things up for Indie Horror Month in style. We're going to be counting down our 10 favorite indie horror movies of the last decade. Do I have that correct?
Yes, you do.
I always worry that I'm going to say something wrong and you're going to be like, wait, that's not what we're doing. And then we have to either start over or completely switch gears mid-show.
We are professionals.
We are. We can do anything.
We certainly can. It has been a month. I'll tell you what. I mean, it's been really awesome. It's been really challenging. But I've been really, appreciative of everybody who's been sharing our Indie Horror Month coverage. I've been really appreciated everybody who has participated in it in terms of the talent and sort of the people that we were able to spotlight. And also I'm hugely appreciative to everybody from Daily Dead who stepped up and helped me out with this. Yourself very much included, because I had sort of this inkling for something fun. And I was like, I know Patrick would totally kill this because he's awesome, but then I'm also giving Patrick a lot of work. And you were a total champ and you've done amazing with your Women of Indie Horror column. And it's been awesome.
That's super nice of you to say. Thank you. It really can't compare to everything that you've done for Indie Horror Month. You completely crushed it with like 60 articles just in 1 month and reading 7 books and watching countless short films and talking to countless creators. And you've done an amazing amount of work and made the month a huge success. So hats off to you.
Oh, thank you. I mean, it's, for me, I just want something good to come out of it for the people involved. Because it's either way, like everything stays the same for me. Like, I've discussed, it's like I get paid a flat fee, so I'm not making anything extra, which is totally cool. I didn't set out to do this because I was trying to like rake in the dough. I don't think any of us in this field.
Oh, you should. It's the best.
I don't think any of us in this field get into it.
I love to rake in the dough. I've never done it, but I dream of doing it someday.
Someday I want to just get like a pile of dollar bills.
Yes,
and
put
them in the backyard and just
roll around on the bed and throw them up in the air.
Yes. So, I mean, I don't have the Demi Moore package, but I have to figure out how to get those Demi dollars a different way, I guess. But yeah, it's been really great. Like just to see people, interacting with stuff. I'm, even if I turn one person on to a new book, a new movie, a new short film, then I feel like I've done something right.
Yeah, for sure.
Think
about how many people got coverage this last month that like may not have gotten any coverage otherwise for their project. It's really cool.
Yeah, thank you. I think ultimately I'd like to see it evolve a little bit. Like, this is something that I did sort of spearhead back in 2011 was the first year. And it's always sort of been like my baby, but I'd really love in the future, and this is something I'm going to address like in my sort of wrap up piece that will also be out today when this, goes live. I know we're all stretched thin. I know we're all already covering every possible thing that we can, but I'd love it if next year other sites were able to sort of join in on it. You know what I mean? Like, I don't feel like cool. It's just something that I should own. Like it shouldn't just be me. Because I mean, think about like how many people out there would have been able to like share their stories if there was multiple sites doing this.
Yeah.
I'm only one person. I've learned my limitations very quickly this year and I did a lot of stuff, but also I'm tired,
Yes, of course.
And, so I, not to put any pressure on any other sites, but it's something I'd love to see get adopted in the future, in some way, shape, or form. It's not something I want to feel like I have ownership over because I don't feel like I do. So I think the more people out there talking about independent, filmmakers and writers and artists and creators, like it's better. And I know, and part of the reason I want to do this now is because we're getting ready to go into May. Movies are coming. They're coming, I almost said Fast and Furious, but yes, even Fast and Furious. You know what I mean? Like we're going to be getting hit with a lot of studio stuff soon, and we're going to cover it. And again, this was never like about being against the studio system, but I think it was just being sure that we're also supporting those out there who are blazing their trail outside of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm excited to cover all the studio stuff, but I'm also trying to be conscientious of like, well, how many smaller movies can I get in? And, oh, by the way, I'm starting a new book at the same time. How am I going to do all of this? So, I just wanted to sort of take this little moment before we kind of start to progress back to whatever normal is going to be for the rest of this year. And just, take the time to celebrate a lot of the creators out there that, maybe got us through last year, got us through the early parts of this year, have stuff coming out the rest of this year, just before we kind of lose a little focus.
Well, and now's a great time to mention that May is going to be Studio Horror Month.
Yes.
Because the studios need
help.
Coverage. They're suffering, and they're not getting talked about nearly enough.
Yes, I'm actually going to stand outside in like a Billy costume. Like I'm going to be like the Salvation Army Santas, but I'm going to stand outside as the Billy costume with my little bell and try to get donations so I can help save the studios also.
There should be one on every corner. Just a Billy ringing a little tricycle bell on every corner.
Can you imagine how weird and creepy that would be though? That would be like, I want to see that happen at Halloween because that would be really unnerving. But like everywhere you go, there's just like Billies everywhere.
I'm into it. Did you start your Saw rewatch? I know you said you were going to.
We are starting tonight.
Okay.
Yes. So we're going to do 1 and 2 tonight.
Ooh, very nice.
Yes. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to. We were texting and I said I was back and forth because a friend of mine said, no, you probably shouldn't because you'll overdo it and you'll burn yourself out before Spiral. But I think I'm going to try it.
I mean, realistically, like I'm going to rewatch 3D because that's the one I remember the least. But you don't really have to.
The only two that I think I've only seen once.
I think because I saw Jigsaw, weirdly enough, in 4DX, that still sticks with me.
You'll never forget it.
So it was a ride of a lifetime. So I kind of have that one still sort of fresh in my brain.
Okay.
And I'm not even sure how much of that's going to play into this.
Probably not very much.
Probably not.
To be the attempt to sort of reboot it. And it was a non-starter. So now they're rebooting it again.
Yeah. So I feel like you probably could skip 3D, but I feel like I'm going to rewatch it anyway, just to be safe.
Yeah.
So there was a few things I kind of remember. The only thing I really remember about 3D is the opening scene in like the window at like the mall or something with like the dudes.
You remember better than I do.
And then I remember Chester Bennington being glued, bare skinned.
He was like in a car, right?
Yeah. That was like,
yeah, I remember that. That's about it.
Yeah, so that's about my.
And the girl who won Scream Queens was in that scene.
Oh yes, she was.
She was in the Tim Sullivan segment of Chillerama.
Oh,
and those are her two big claims to fame.
Oh, good for her, I guess.
Good for her. the segment that stops the movie cold. Curse of the Werebear.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was doing research for this, I noticed Chillerama was listed. And then Werebear was listed separately, which was very interesting to me.
Well, it's practically its own movie. It feels like it goes on for 90 minutes.
It does. Yeah, it does.
Hey, I'm speaking to one of the co-stars of Chillerama. Really, I should be getting all the inside skinny from you.
I know. You never even asked for my autograph or anything.
Right?
Yes. I mean, you can see us at the end when they shot at the New Beverly.
I have paused it and sent you pictures before.
Yes. And you see us walking out of it too, which is kind of funny.
Yeah.
So that's weird and kind of fun.
It's awesome.
So yeah, I didn't put any movies that I'm in on my list.
Okay. Me either.
There's so many. Like, oh gosh, there's so many.
It was easy for me to avoid movies that I'm in.
Okay. But did you put movies you were almost in? Because,
I did not.
Okay.
Those are all
good.
snuff films, so I didn't include those.
Oh.
Yeah.
Do I want to know? Look, whatever you and Erica are up to over there, that's your business.
She wants to murder me on film, I guess, is what I'm saying.
I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah.
So,
which is way better than just wanting to like murder me not on film.
Yeah. I mean, if she's going to murder you, like get something out of it. Right?
Exactly.
I think it's only fitting with like F this movie. That should be like the final post of F this movie.
It probably will be.
Oh, and then when Charlie gets older, he can resurrect it.
The website or like my dead body?
The website.
Oh, all right. Well, I'd rather he resurrect my dead body.
I know. I'm just hoping like I'm still waiting for the live forever technology to happen.
Okay.
I want that. Like I feel like in 20 years. So I don't want to die.
Right.
So,
this podcast has taken such a weird turn.
It has. I'm questioning my own mortality. So, especially after
we
the
are trying to save studio horror. And now all of a sudden we're being murdered on film and trying to live forever.
Yes. Maybe we should jump into our list.
Let's do it.
People listening, like, the 5 of them or whoever it is. But yeah, they're like, guys, just, moving along now.
I tuned in to hear some indie horror recommendations.
And now Patrick's going to get murdered on camera and Heather doesn't want to die because she's scared of death.
All right. What is counting down from 10 to 1? I know you have several honorable mentions too. We'll get to those at the end.
I'm such an indecisive bitch. I'm just like, I can't decide.
Had I opened that can of worms, I probably would have the same, like 20 honorable mentions because there'd be all these movies that I want to make sure that I name. I just decided to try to cap it off at 10. So what would your number 10 be?
Oh, pardon me. I was just sneezing on mute. I apologize.
That's
of course.
Okay.
I was like, oh, Patrick's asking me a question. Let me sneeze really quick.
That's when I decide to throw it to you.
Yes. Anyway, so my very first, I guess their rankings. I don't know. I pretty much love all these movies.
Same with mine. It's very loose. Like, is my number 7 better than my number 8? No, it's just 10 really good movies.
Yes. So my number 10 would be, it is I guess it's 2012 in Australia, 2013 here in the States. So it'd be we'll call it the 2013 horror comedy, 100 Bloody Acres.
Oh, very nice.
From Cameron Cairns and Colin Cairns, who are a pair of brother Australian filmmakers. If you've never seen it, it is hilarious, gory, brutal, fun. You kind of feel like the movie's going to take a Wolf Creek turn. And for a brief moment, it sort of does, but the comedy kind of comes back into play. But it's a really fantastically funny little movie. Kids get stuck, come across the guys who basically collect body parts for their business. Things go awry. It's kind of like if Tucker and Dale were body snatchers, I guess is the best way to put it.
Right.
But it has really great performances from Damon Harriman and Angus Sampson. Angus, most people will probably know from, I believe, isn't he in the Insidious movies? Yes,
he is.
Tucker.
He's the other ghost hunter with Lee Winnell.
Yes. Love them Australians. But and what's funny is also Angus and Damon also appear in Mortal Kombat as voices.
Right.
Which I think is hilarious because Angus plays the voice of Goro and Damon is the voice of Cabal. So
what's the Angus Sampson movie where he's trying not to poop the whole movie?
The
Mule wrote it. The Mule. Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. So, and he's also in Fury Road, which is fun too.
Right.
So, but yeah, I adore those gentlemen and I love 100 Bloody Acres and I never get to really talk about it a whole lot. It's not one a lot of folks talk about when they talk about like modern horror comedies. I feel like Tucker and Dale sort of gets that distinction more often than not, which it should, because it's amazing. But if you're in for a movie that's sort of in the same vein, I would recommend 100 Bloody Acres.
I just looked it up. It's currently streaming on Prime and it's on Tubi, if you don't mind commercials. So there are ways to see it. But I remember seeing it a couple of years ago and having a lot of fun with it. It did remind me of Tucker and Dale versus Evil. So that comparison is very apt.
Yeah. It's interesting because I was going to put Tucker and Dale on this list. It is one of my honorable mentions. But I've talked about it so much that I was like, I wanted to kind of do something else. Because Tucker, even though Tucker and Dale premiered in 2010, it was officially released here in the States in 2011.
I mean, anything post 2010, I think is fair game, even if it's technically not the last 10 years. I would say anything post, 2010 or later.
Yeah.
Counts.
So that was my first choice.
All right. Awesome.
How about you?
Pick. My 10 is not an Australian film. It is a New Zealand film, and that is called Housebound from 2014, written and directed by Gerard Johnstone. And it's about a woman played by Morgana O'Reilly who gets arrested and put on house arrest and then thinks that she starts to see ghosts in her house. And her performance is very deadpan and very, very funny. The movie is a really terrific horror comedy. Never gets like super Peter Jackson splatter gory or anything like that, but it is really a special little movie that kind of came and went. I think I had it on my list the year it came out, but even I don't talk about it that much anymore. And I wish I heard more people talking about it because it's really good.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that movie. And again, it's one of those that sort of feels like people talked about it a little bit when it came out. And then like, we just don't really hear about it a whole lot.
No. It is also streaming on Tubi right now.
Awesome. Tubi is like, boy, they really save it. The amount of movies on Tubi is ridiculous.
It's wild. Like
it is. I
almost wish they would let you pay for a non-ad option. I'm sure then they wouldn't be able to have as many movies as they do. I'm sure that, it'd screw up the licensing and like, then they wouldn't be able to have movies like Housebound and 100 Bloody Acres. But, man, there's so much good stuff on there.
There really is. Because I just did like a streaming list of like movies from there. And I was like, I could have had 500 movies on that list.
Yeah,
easily.
It's wild.
So yeah, I don't know how they work it, but good for them. Because chances are, if you can't find it anywhere else, most likely you're going to find it on Tubi. So, which is kind of cool.
I heard somebody recently, I think it was somebody on Twitter, say it's like, compare it to the video store. Like it's the closest thing we have to the video store that we had growing up. And I think that's an apt comparison.
It is. And I'll tell you what, trying to go through their horror section takes hours.
Yeah.
Like you should just clear at least 2 hours to go through and look at everything. Because there's just that much content there. So it's pretty amazing. As much as, I'm a big believer in like, yeah, of course, physical media is important because, and especially as we're seeing with Warner Brothers, like moving away from it and things like that, like it's crucial to be able to hold on to these things. But ultimately, like I'm never shaming anybody because they don't get a lot of physical media because I get what I can. But a lot of times I'm reliant on streaming services as well.
Sure. Yeah.
So, look, somebody had to buy Half Baked off of Vudu 2 weeks ago, because they lost their DVD. So what are you going to do?
Darn. That was one of those movies that during the short period that I worked at Blockbuster, we couldn't keep in stock. Like it would get checked out and never returned. That and Dazed and Confused were just always out, not because they were being checked out consistently, but because people would just keep the tapes.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Well, stoners are not really good about returning stuff.
No, unfortunately. Slips their mind.
Yeah, what are you going to do? They're like, yeah, just charge me the $40 or whatever. Abba Zabba's his only friend. What are you going to do?
What is next for you? Your number 9.
All right. My next one is another movie. Well, this one was played film festivals in 2012, came out in the US in 2013. And it is No One Lives from, oh boy,
Your favorite.
Ryue?
Ryu Kitamura, or
I know Kitamura, like,
yeah,
but I'm totally terrible with the first name, and I apologize because I don't want to sound like a jerk. I think it's Ryue. Frick, that just sounds terrible. Anyways,
it's okay.
I absolutely love this movie. It was produced by WWE Studios, which technically now is sort of in bed with like NBC Universal, but back then they weren't. And then eventually it was distributed by Anchor Bay. So I was like trying to make sure like all my indie P's and Q's were taken care of.
Right.
But I absolutely adore this movie. I mean, it's Luke Evans and Lee Turgison, so right there I was happy. But the amount of it's such a really fantastic take on what you sort of expect from modern slashers, but it does it really differently, where you're just not quite sure like who you should be scared of, but probably everybody. But Luke Evans is a total badass in it. And I just love when like main villains in movies, they don't have names. They're just like their occupation or something like that. He's like just driver in the movie.
Right.
You know, and that to me is just like so cool and old school. But there is the scene. I mean, it sucks because Brodus Clay is in it from WWE, who also went on to become a Fox News broadcaster, who then ultimately sexually harassed his co-host.
Really?
Oh yeah.
I don't know anything about any of this. So.
Yeah, he was like on a Fox talk show for a few years, and then it came out that he was like sexually harassing the female co-host, which, you know, is bad.
It's almost like you can't trust the people at Fox News.
It's so strange. It's so weird. Yeah, you'd think, but nope, not in this instance. But the best part in that movie is still the imagery of Luke Evans basically coming out of the body sack of Brodus Clay. That still to me is like one of the coolest visuals.
That's like the one thing I remember from the movie.
Yeah, well, that's what you need. You just need that one scene, because I'll tell you, because I saw it at home to cover it, and then we went and saw it in theaters. It was like one of the smaller Burbank AMC theaters, and I just remember when that moment happened, there was a guy in the theater who literally stood up and started clapping. And I started clapping in response to him clapping, because I was so happy for him in that moment, because that guy looked so excited. And there was only maybe 6 of us in the theater, so it wasn't like there was a lot of people. Right. But yeah, I'm you know me, I'm all about slashers. I'm all about doing something a little different. And that one was gnarly enough to really work well for me. And, you know, Luke Evans doesn't hurt either.
I'm so due for a rewatch because I blind bought the Blu-ray on your recommendation, whatever year it came out, probably 2014. And I don't think I've seen it since then. So the one thing I remember is him climbing out of the body.
Yeah, it was funny because actually when I did the set visit for The Purge, I don't remember if it was season 1 or season 2. I think it was season 1, but Lee Turgison was there. And I actually got to talk to him a little bit about it. And he said he was like, it was probably one of the most fun shoots he'd ever got to be on. So that was kind of cool. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's streaming anywhere. Let me.
Oh, don't you worry. It's on Tubi.
Yes, of course it is Tubi.
And IMDb TV for free, so you can watch it through Amazon Prime. You can buy it digitally for $6, but it is streaming for free in several places. Nice.
I knew you'd figure it out.
Yeah. Don't you worry. I haven't seen another Kitamura movie that I've been crazy about. I mean, did you see Downrange?
Downrange was okay.
It was very intense and stressful. I just didn't love it, you know?
Yeah.
It's well made, but
yeah, I liked his segment in Nightmare Cinema.
Remind me which one was his.
His was
Is his the church one?
Yes.
Yeah, I didn't love that one.
Oh, okay.
Nightmare Cinema was kind of a mixed bag for me.
I think, and I might have gotten maybe Mick Garris mad at me about it.
Uh-oh.
I actually think his segment should have played earlier.
I would agree with that.
Like, I feel like his was so solemn in a way.
Yeah.
That it just felt like a strange note to end on. Like, I get it. Like, we're ending with Mick. Mick brought it all together, and Mick is awesome, and he's a fantastic filmmaker. But I think if they would have structured it differently, I think that movie would have hit differently for me.
I think the first segment, my memory is that the first segment was the best one.
I like that one. It was Alejandro Bruce.
Yeah, which is great, but then you have nowhere to go, you know? So that's a problem when you have nowhere to go but down, unfortunately.
Yeah, like it's almost like it's kind of like you know, for lack of it's like a wrestling show. Like you have to get you got to get something in there to get the crowd hot.
Right.
All right, so you got to get everybody ready, and then their next thing has to be as good, but it doesn't have to be as monumental. And then you got to really hit them in the third, and then you can bring them back down because the beer match is the fourth. Okay. And then you end on the high one, like the main event on the fifth. I think it's like you just kind of have to structure it like in that kind of way. Yeah. And it works out better. So everything basically boils down to professional wrestling, I think, is where it all comes, you know, what it all comes down to. So
I remember going to see like live professional wrestling when I was a kid, WWF wrestling, and being like not disappointed, but it was like you didn't get 2 stars wrestling in any of the matches. I don't even think the main event did you get 2 stars wrestling. It was always 1 star and one, like, what's the term for the guy who's just like
the jobber? The
jobber, right? It was it was just a lot of jobbers.
You were probably, because were you doing like mid to early 90s?
This was probably late 80s, actually.
Okay. Yeah.
I was very young.
Yeah, because I will say, like, towards the late 90s, like, I saw some crazy awesome stuff once I got back into it.
Yeah.
So, you know, they never really held back, like, in those eras, when it came to, like, bringing The Rock out or Stone Cold out or whoever. So I got pretty lucky in that regard.
Yeah.
And the jobbers were sort of few and far between because they had so much talent at that point. So even like their mid-card talent was still really strong.
Okay.
And interesting. So
this was more like when you used to watch like Saturday morning WWF.
Oh, like Superstars.
Yes. Yeah. When it was like Tito Santana and some jobber. And like, that's basically what I saw. I might've seen the main event might've been 2 stars, but I don't remember who they were.
Yeah. And it's also tougher, especially when you go to house shows.
Right.
Because house shows generally will sort of, you know, pull their talent back and stuff like that. And sometimes the big guys don't work those shows.
Which is what this was. I forgot that that's what that was called, a house show.
That's okay. Yeah, I actually got really lucky in the early to mid 80s with a house show because everybody was there. Of course, this was the pre-racist Hogan days, but Hogan was there.
Yeah.
I lost my mind.
Well, of course.
Remember it was right early on when Hacksaw Jim Duggan was becoming a thing. Oh. My mom was such a huge fan of his. Yes. We have a foam.
I used to have one, a 2x4. Yeah. I bought it at Survivor Series.
Nice. That's awesome. So we had, it was pretty much all superstars then, but I think it was a little different back then. And there might've been a couple of local guys probably wrestling against like a tag team or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, we got pretty lucky, with that show. So
nice.
Yeah. Anyway, now everyone's like, great. Now we know how 80s and 90s wrestling was. So
wrestling tangent. The dog is into it. And now we're back to my number 9. Is a movie that I feel like we just talked about on our last episode when we talked about The Howling.
Interesting.
And that is from 2014, Late Phases.
Ooh, nice. That was on my honorable mentions.
Yeah. Adrian Garcia Bogliano's Werewolf in a Retirement Home movie. I just rewatched it yesterday. I didn't really have a chance to rewatch any of these movies. The only one I rewatched was Late Phases, because I was like, should it be on the list? There's obviously a lot of movies that are very worthy. And so I know that for some people, like, it doesn't belong this high, but I don't know. I just think there's not a ton of like well done indie werewolf movies, because werewolf movies are hard to do without a ton of money. You have to do practical suits, or you do CG suits, or, CG werewolves, which they don't have the money for. You have to do transformations. Those are expensive. And Late Phases doesn't have like the best practical werewolf. I'm glad it has practical werewolves, but the transformation is pretty stunning.
It's absolutely awesome.
Yeah. I mean, the way it's shot is really cool. It's kind of this one continuous take that travels back and forth. The cast is really, really great. Nick D'Amici is really, really great as Ambrose, the blind veteran who just moves into this retirement community that is besieged by werewolves once a month. You have Ethan Embry playing his son. You have Tom Noonan. You have Lance Guest. I love all the quirks. I love Nick D'Amici like carrying a shovel around instead of a cane. I love the gore. I love the effects. I just think it's a really, really cool movie that, when people are talking about modern werewolf movies, it does get brought up, but it's just not a movie that gets as much love as I would like for it to get. So I thought, well, I'll put it on my list. And it is, just so you guys know, currently streaming on Amazon Prime and Vudu free with ads.
All right. No Tubi. I am shocked.
No Tubi, but Vudu. So you can still watch it even if you don't subscribe to any services.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of Nick D'Amici's. I like him in Stakeland a lot, but I love him in Late Phases.
Me too.
Like, to me, that's like the performance.
Yeah.
And it's just, he's so good. And I mean, when is Tom Noonan not a little disquieting? Like, I'd love him just to be in like a regular comedy, be like, hey guys, but I don't think we're ever going to get that movie, which is okay.
No. Yeah, that's all right.
So, he is who he is, and that's why we love him. But yeah, that movie rules. I adore it.
It's really good. And the other title is Night of the Lone Wolf, which is like such a terrible and generic title. I'm so glad they went with Late Phases, because Late Phases is such a cool title for that movie.
I'm guessing that probably in other countries, the idea of like werewolf phases doesn't probably translate. So something with werewolf in the title would, though.
The Blu-ray just doubles down and has both titles.
Yes,
so it just says Late Phases, Night of the Lone Wolf.
Yes. So hey, if you've got
Edge
two
of Tomorrow,
titles,
Live, Die, Repeat.
Exactly. Excellent. All right. Well, my next choice might be on your list.
Okay.
So we'll see how this goes. But my next choice is Excision from Richard Bates Jr.
Ooh, great pick. Not on my list, but definitely would be an honorable mention. I do love Richard Bates.
I was going to say we're I think we're both pretty big fans of Ricky Bates Jr.
Definitely.
It's funny because he kind of calls himself Ricky, which is sort of strange to me. But hey, if you're out there making kick-ass movies, you can call yourself whatever you want. I just think Ricky's fun. First of all, I'm going to punch my dog in the face. Not really,
Don't
guys.
do it.
But my little werewolf is freaking out right now, which is not fun. But yeah, this movie still sits with me. And what's really, really funny is last night for like an hour, we just played some of the Trivial Pursuit Horror Edition, and Excision was actually one of the questions.
Oh, nice.
And Brian was like, "Oh, you're never going to get this. I don't even know what this movie is." And the question was like, in Excision, what does Pauline, what type of surgery does Pauline try to commit or whatever on her sister?
Yeah.
And he's like looking at me, and I was like, I know this. And he was like, how do you know this? And I'm like, because Excision rules.
Yeah, it does.
I'm a big fan of all of Ricky's movies to various degrees. To me, Excision is the one that, I mean, it's been almost 10 years since I've seen this movie and I cannot get it out of my head. It's just never left. It's absolutely astonishing. Annalyn McCord in it is just so great. And what's funny is, like, in retrospect, like when we were sort of in the early pandemic times, I kind of started watching the 90210 reboot series,
Right.
which she was on. So it was really interesting to see her on that show. And I get why Richard would like cast her for this movie, because it is sort of an extension of her character from 90210 of this, to a degree. Like, I would say her exaggerated version of herself is the extension of her character from 90210. The other part of her character isn't. It's something, you know, it's very, you know, because she's sort of awkward and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But I totally got it. Like, once I started watching 90210, I was like, well, how do you pick some girl from like a teen drama to be in this movie and think she can handle it? And I'm like, this is how. But it is an astonishing piece of work. Like, and the end of it is such a gut punch that also makes me cry.
Yeah.
And also, it's well worth noting that Tracy Lords in this movie is freaking phenomenal as well. And this should have been like, I don't know where her career is these days. I don't know what she's up to, if she's cool, but like, I would have loved this to kick off the Lords Assance. Because to me, I was like, I have been missing Tracy Lords in movies and we need more of her. She's so damn good in this, and her and Annalyn together. And Ariel Winter, who, you know, was on like Modern Family at the time that she did this movie, which I think is really interesting. She's quite great too. Like, the whole cast from top to bottom, just fantastic work. I could just gush for like another hour, so I won't, but it's really fantastic.
Yeah, no, Excision rules, and Ricky Bates rules, because I've liked every single one of his movies, and no two of them have been really alike. Because, you know, he does kind of a hard pivot after this and does Suburban Gothic, and then he goes back to more like Excision territory with Trashfire.
Whew, that movie.
Oh, I love Trashfire.
That's trauma. That movie is just trauma.
I love it. It played at the Chicago Critics Film Festival a couple of years ago, and it was a late show. It started at like 10, so it wasn't going to finish till about midnight. And most of the guys who were running the festival wanted to go home because they'd been there all day and they knew I was staying to see it. So they're like, hey, would you do us a favor? Would you stick around and collect the audience ballots after this movie? And I said, sure, no problem, not predicting what was going to happen, because boy, I got a lot of angry people thrusting their ballots in my hand saying I'd give it a 0 if I could, you know, just, it rubbed a lot of people the wrong way.
Oh boy, I could imagine. And here's the thing though, that to me is the earmark of a really good filmmaker. Winnie, please. Because they, like, when somebody can provoke reactions like that,
absolutely,
that's when you know you're doing something. Whether you're, you know, there's no denying that you've done something right if you can provoke a reaction like that.
Yeah.
So yeah. I was less in love with Trashfire, but Jesus Christ, did that ending just like, I felt like somebody took a sledgehammer to my face.
Excision is probably still my favorite of his, but they've all been. Why can't I remember the name of the most recent one with the?
With
Airbnb.
With was it Robert Patrick?
The Crew and Robert Patrick.
Oh my gosh. Hold on a second.
Yeah, we can look it up. I can't think of the name of it. I liked it.
And some reason Ricky does not have a Wikipedia page.
Tone deaf.
That's what it is.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, that one I think was a little less successful, but still really good. And again, it's unhinged in the ways that only, you know, Ricky can do as a director.
Yeah.
So hats off to him. I want movies that push my buttons like that.
Right.
And I understand they're not for everybody, and that's fine. There's tons of other movies you can go watch. We got 18 other movies or 19 other movies that we're going to talk about today that you can watch if you're not into movies that push your buttons like that. But I like being challenged like that. Like I like, that's why a lot of people were really angry with Assassination Nation a few years ago, because
I really like that movie too.
Yeah. And that movie that almost made it, but I didn't feel like it was horror enough to be on a horror list.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So I didn't even put on my honorable mentions, although I would have, although there are some really horrible things that happen. Too bad that director kind of got full of himself, but that's a whole different discussion. Yeah, he was, because like I didn't watch the movie with Zendaya, and I think it's
Levinson, that's him?
Yeah.
I did not know that. Yes. I did not like that movie at all. I really liked Assassination Nation. I did not like Malcolm and Marie at all. I kind of ran out of time during the critics of voting season, and I was like, I had to pick my battles, and that was like one of the three like bigger ones that I just didn't get a chance to watch. No, that movie is a big woof.
Yeah. So I
did not know that was the same filmmaker.
Yeah. And it was like, basically that movie was created as his response to the criticisms he received for Assassination Nation.
Oh, wow. Whatever.
Yeah. Which I'm like, there was plenty of us who were like,
yeah, I gave it a really good review.
Yeah. So, there's plenty of us that loved it and got what he was doing. Mm-hmm. So, but he just couldn't focus on that and couldn't focus on the good stuff. He could only focus on the bad stuff. So, which is a bit of a bummer. But still, I think Assassination Nation is fantastic. And I think it's just proven its validity and its need for existence more so over the last few years. So.
Oh, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I have great news.
Yeah.
Excision is on Tubi.
Yes, it is.
And it's on Vudu if for some reason you have an allergy to Tubi, but I don't know why you would, because you've been able to watch almost all of our movies on Tubi. We should have just called this the Tubi Indie Horror Film Festival. Let's make May Tubi month. Yeah. It can be, we'll start our podcast and we'll call it Tubi or not Tubi. I think there's actually on Tubi. I think there's actually there is an article column that does that. And I think somebody else does Tubi Tuesdays also. Yeah. So we have to come up with something super clever, but I'm on board. All right, good. Because I don't want to encroach anybody's space. So I want to play fair. I don't want to encroach in anybody's titles or anything. No. It's the last thing I need right now. Yeah. So. All right. My next pick, my number 8, is a movie that I really wanted to rewatch before recording this show and just didn't have a chance. It is not on Tubi. I've already checked, but it is on Netflix, where it has resided really since it came out. Ooh. And that is 2017's The Blackcoat's Daughter. That is, of course, on my list. It is on your list. Okay, well, then we can wait until... No. Let's just do it. Oh, all right. Yeah. Oz Perkins. I'm not the world's biggest fan of like super slow burn horror. I like it when it's done right. I think a lot of movies try to do it and kind of whiff, and so it ends up being more like no burn horror. Yeah. But The Blackcoat's Daughter is one of those movies that really does it right, that does like this sense of dread and loss and sadness better than most horror movies that have come out in the last 10 years, I would say. You have it on your list, I'm sure, because Emma Roberts is in it. It's the Emma Roberts / Osgood Perkins mashup, because I'm a big fan of his stuff. I didn't totally love I haven't seen the middle one. I still haven't seen it. I'm the pretty thing that lives in the house. Yeah, that is if somebody were to call that the no burn horror, I wouldn't disagree with them. Okay. But I will say I watched it once and was kind of like iffy on it. And then I had it on one day when I was just like cleaning house, and it was sort of soothing. I don't know how to explain it. There's something about sort of the pacing in that movie that just feels very calming. All right. But
not a lot happens.
No.
But I will say between Blackcoat's daughter and Gretel and Hansel, like, you know, those are two of sort of my favorite of modern horrors.
Yeah. I liked Gretel and Hansel.
Yeah. I just, you know what's crazy? This is how messed up 2020 was. At some point, they sent me stuff for Gretel and Hansel. I think I was out of town at Sundance. And this is, I love my other half so much. But sometimes he forgets to tell me things. And that includes when packages come to the house. Because a lot of times, like, if they knock on the door, like, he'll open it just to calm the dogs down. And then he'll take the packages and put them in his office, which I don't really work in there very often. And so we were literally cleaning out the office like 2 months ago. And he's like, what is all this stuff? And apparently they sent me these gorgeous Gretel and Hansel posters and a book and everything. And I was like, when did this show up? And how did I not know this? So yeah, if I never say thank you for packages, people, it's because literally they go into an office and I discover them like 7 months later. That happened to one of the JB Halloween CDs he sent me once.
That's right. Yeah.
I was gone for something and it came in and it just ended up in a pile in the office because there's so much stuff in there. Oh my God, it's ridiculous. And it was just like, I found it like the summer after and felt like a big jerk because I like to like acknowledge people when they send something.
Right. Sure.
And so I'm sure JB thought I was the biggest jerk ever, which I am. So, but yeah, I really love the Blackcoat's daughter. I think that there's something really effective about the mood that he sets in there and the way this one I'm being a little vague because I don't know if everybody's seen it. So I don't want to kind of ruin the latter half of the movie when it sort of comes together and you realize what's been happening.
Right.
But there's some good shit in that movie.
Yeah, there is.
And I honestly think it's the reason Kiernan Shipka ended up getting the Chilling Tales of Sabrina. I think it's because of her performance in this movie.
I have yet to watch the Chilling Tales of Sabrina, but I used to read the comic and I really liked it.
Yeah, I never got a chance. I'm so bad with shows. Like I can barely
it's hard.
keep on.
You're committing yourself to 10 hours versus, you could watch 5 movies in that time. So
yeah. It's like I already have trouble enough keeping up with all the movies. So keeping on the TV is difficult. So,
yeah.
I mean, I always heard good things. I heard that the series finale kind of whiffed a little bit, but one of these days I'll get into it. So
yeah, me too.
Today may not be that day, but I'll get into
it. Blackcoat's daughter is very good.
Yeah, I am a big fan. So
right.
And that's not, I think that's pretty much just exclusively Netflix still, right?
Yeah.
It never went anywhere else.
Not that I know of. No, there is at least a Blu-ray of it, but I don't have it.
Yeah, it's weird how some of the titles that sort of ended becoming like the Netflix-y movies.
Mm-hmm.
I guess maybe because they've changed how they distribute these movies, because those, when they were like sort of Netflix exclusives, they weren't called Netflix originals.
Right.
So it kind of bums me out that we don't get any Netflix original Blu-ray releases. Because I think a lot of us were talking about that with The Night Comes For Us recently because of Mortal Kombat. That's the one movie I've been begging Netflix for like since 2018 for the love of God, put it on Blu-ray. Because I just want to see the special features because I know they exist.
Well, and they've recently struck that deal with Criterion so that some of their originals like Roma or The Irishman or Marriage Story have gone straight to Criterion Blu-ray. It would be nice if The Night Comes For Us was in the Criterion collection.
Hey, it's worthy, I think.
Yeah, I agree.
I think I made one little goofy tweet about it and it took off. Nobody retweets my actual work, but I make goofy tweets about stuff. And it's like, and they're like, oh,
so rewarding.
It's just so great. It feels so good to get your hard work appreciated. Like,
yeah.
But hey, if nothing else, I know I turned a few people onto that movie with that tweet, and I am proud of that.
Yeah, that's good.
So that's good.
What is your number 7?
All right. Well, I'm going to kind of jump around here a little bit because I'm going to be skipping Blackcoat's daughter since we already did that. So I'm just going to go into my next one, which is The Eyes of My Mother.
Okay.
Yes. Going to get artsy over
Yeah, we
here.
are. Shoot.
I was a huge fan of this film from Nicholas Pesh, who has gone on to direct Piercing, and he also did The Grudge last year, which I think a lot of people were unnecessarily mean to. And I think eventually, in about 10 years, people will be like, oh, that really wasn't as bad as everybody made it out to be.
I still haven't seen it.
It's a mean movie. It's a mean little movie. I get it, but then I don't get it because, like, I don't know what people, I don't know. You have a Bill Sadler movie in theaters. Like, I was just happy.
Sure.
You know, and Lin Shaye doing crazy Lin Shaye stuff, getting to do something totally different than we usually see from her. I don't know. Anyway, the minute I saw this movie, I literally, I think I sat in silence for like 20 minutes just afterwards. Like, I just sat there and I was like, holy shit. Because it's so bleak and it's so dark, but it's so beautiful. And I absolutely love everything about it. And it is a quick watch too, because it's not even 80 minutes.
No, it's real short.
It is, but its entire running time just really packs such a wallop, and you get such it. Kika, who's the lead in it, she is so heartbreaking in this movie, but yet so evil too. It's such a really beautiful performance. And my one claim to fame, as I talked about, there was a lot of ways, like the way she would act in the movie, it reminded me of a young, oh my gosh, why am I blanking on, I can't believe I'm blanking on her name because I got them to talk. Hold on a second. She reminded me of a young Felissa Rose from the original Sleepaway Camp, who is this character that looks so innocent and has this wide-eyedness to her, where it almost feels like she's like this silent observer, but ultimately she is the purveyor of violence too.
Right.
And I remember in my review, I mentioned that, and Kike was like, oh my God. She's like, I love Sleepaway Camp and I love Felissa. I can't even believe you would say that. Meanwhile, over time, because of that, because apparently I think I mentioned it to Felissa Rose also, or I got them connected on social media. They ended up meeting and becoming friends.
That's awesome.
And I feel like I had a little bit of part of that, and it makes me so happy. But I just think
you never made me friends with Felissa Rose. Oh,
Felissa's friends with everybody, though. She's everybody's friend. She is. But it's such a really fantastic performance. I get it for people who maybe it's a little hard to stomach at times, because there's some cruelty in this movie that is kind of hard to stomach. But for me, that sort of blending of this delicate, like it's very delicate filmmaking, but it's also really blunt and brutal. Mm-hmm. And to me, when filmmakers can walk that kind of a line, especially in a directorial debut, like I'm an instant fan. So I love it.
I remember it making me excited to see whatever he was going to do next. And I'm a little bit mixed on Piercing. There's a lot of stuff in Piercing that I like. I don't think I love it all, and I still need to see The Grudge, but Eyes of My Mother, I remember being a very impressive debut.
I'm the same with you on Piercing. There's some things in that movie that works really, really well.
The music is awesome, obviously.
I think Chris Abbott's performance in that movie is also really good. There's like the scene where he's kind of like walking through everything in the bathroom.
Yeah.
He's low key always sort of the MVP of movies, but ends up getting overlooked because he's always against these really strong female performances, which is interesting to me.
And lately he's been typecast as like a sociopath.
Yeah, but he's almost like a schlub of a sociopath. Like he's not quite.
That's my title.
He's not quite like distinguished enough to be like really amazing at it, but like especially like in something like Possessor. Yeah. Where he, like, to me, you know, I absolutely think, and I can't believe I'm blanking on her name now. I'm just all over the place right now. From Mandy.
Name? Andrea Riseborough.
Yes, Jesus. Like, I just wrote about her in another movie recently. Anyway, like, she's so good in this movie, and she's fantastic, and Jennifer Jason Leigh is great. But there's a subtlety to how he has to play the role because at a certain point in the movie, he's playing her inside of his body, pretending to be him, which is like 2 layers removed from the original character. And it's really great. So as much as I love Andrea in that movie and I love her in everything, like
she's
he low key is kind of like, you could study that performance and really find ways to like dissect a lot of it. And he kind of gets sort of overlooked a little bit. And I think the same thing happens in Piercing too, because he's basically, again, playing against a very strong female in Mia Wasikowska. Is that how you say that? Gosh, I can't believe I'm usually so good at name pronunciations. But again, he's playing against such a really strong female in that movie. He kind of gets lost, but I think there's some really smart acting choices that he does in it. But I do agree that there's aspects of that movie that I don't totally love.
Yeah.
It's a movie I like.
Yeah.
But Eyes of My Mother to me is like a masterpiece, I think. I think that to me was just like, that's how you do a directorial debut.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah.
And guess what?
What?
It's on Tubi.
Of course, yay, Tubi.
And Vudu and Prime, Amazon Prime. So you have lots of ways to watch The Eyes of My Mother if you've never seen it, but you absolutely should check it out.
Excellent. So what's next on your list?
Next on mine was the one I wasn't sure about. It might be on your list still, unless you swapped it out before we started recording. I said I wasn't sure if this was technically an indie or not, and we decided that yes, it was, because it was made independently and then picked up and distributed by Blumhouse and Anchor Bay. Yeah,
I went ahead and switched it out in the meantime.
Okay.
But it was definitely on my list before we chatted.
So that is Rob Zombie's The Lords of Salem.
Dun, dun. Did you get the soundtrack?
I did, yeah.
I'm sure it sold out like immediately. I didn't get to get it, and I was so freaking bummed.
I'm gonna look right now and see if it sold out. Yes, it just arrived yesterday, actually. So Erica and I were listening to it yesterday. It is not sold out currently.
Oh, for real? I'm gonna do that.
The $300 deluxe box sold out within seconds, because I think they only made like 6 of them or something. It came in like the big wooden box, and I don't know who's spending $300 on the Lords of Salem soundtrack, but more power to you. I
wish
bought
I had
the regular
it.
one. Yeah. Was listening to it yesterday. The music is incredible. A lot of his like taste in classic rock is not mine, because we've been listening to some of his other soundtracks, like his Halloween soundtrack and the 3 from Hell soundtrack. And a lot of the like 70s rock he picks are songs that I don't love, like Blinded by the Light by Manfred Mann. But the actual score pieces by John Five are really, really, really cool. I love The Lords of Salem. It remains my favorite Rob Zombie movie. It's so different from all of his other movies in a really good way. Again, a very slow burn kind of a movie. And, influences all over the place. Everybody from Lucio Fulci to Dario Argento to Ken Russell to David Lynch. It's all over the place. But I think Sherry Moon Zombie is really, really great in it. I would say it was her best performance, but I think she's even better in 3 from Hell. But
I really like her in 3 from Hell a lot.
I think she's amazing in 3 from Hell. I've come around on that movie a lot, and I like it, but she has always, even from the first time I saw it when I was more mixed on it, I was just in love with her performance. I think she's so great in that movie.
Yeah. I think I know everybody talks about, directors who work with their wives, whatever. That's been happening like for like 100 years. Like who the hell cares anymore? Honestly, if you want to work with your spouse, like more power to you. And I actually think when you look at her progression as an actress over the years, like she's put in the work, because there is growth. Like I still love her in House of a Thousand Corpses because it's so raw.
Yeah.
In that she's so raw in that performance that it really sells everything else about that movie, because she isn't an established like actress yet. Right. And I think people just they totally. I mean, I guess it's just everybody has problems with Rob Zombie movies to begin with, which is just the stupidest thing ever. but there's just something really sad and haunting about her character Heidi in this movie, where she's just so lost and she just has no choice but to sort of give herself over to this because she's so compelled, because fate has brought her to this.
Right.
And it's really sad. Like, I think the stuff with her and Jeff Daniel Phillips is some of the most heartbreaking like dialogue, because it's just like, it's somebody who cares so deeply for somebody who they can tell that they're being affected by this force, but there's nothing that they can do to prevent it. And what do you do when that person just slips away?
You can read the entire movie as just a metaphor for addiction too, and all of their scenes still play the same way.
Yeah,
because he sees her being taken over by this thing, and he's powerless to stop it, and she's kind of powerless to stop it because she's in the throes of addiction or the allure of these forces. However you want to read the movie, Jeff Daniel Phillips, I think, is like the MVP of that movie. I think he's so good. Yeah,
and again, it's like I just wish people would sort of stop judging Rob Zombie movies because of who he is beyond being a filmmaker. Like, I just hate this mindset that if you're just, you've only been known as one thing, that you can't possibly be good at something else.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we should be past that, but and there's plenty of people who are passionate about Rob Zombie out there, but then you also get so many people who just continuously still talk shit because it's Rob Zombie, and it's really infuriating. I don't know.
I can't say something pro Rob Zombie on Twitter without half a dozen people slipping in to say something.
Yeah, but his
derogatory or right. Yeah.
Like,
right,
okay,
exactly.
We get it. Like, I don't necessarily love his original Halloween either, but like, I can appreciate everything else. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It just bugs me.
Yeah, I'm with you.
So, but yeah, I'm a huge Lords of Salem fan. And in fact, it was we were watching last night. We were trying to organize Blu-rays and stuff, and we decided, we were like, oh, we're halfway to Halloween. We're going to do Halloween and Halloween 2 tonight. And it's the 35th anniversary Blu-ray for Halloween, and they have the Lords of Salem trailer on there.
Oh, nice.
And we always save Lords for October. I don't know why that is, but it just feels right. And we were like, last night, we're like, oh, should we just watch Lords of Salem this week too while we're at it? So yeah, it's a fantastic movie. I do think if I'm looking at the movies where Rob really pushes himself, I think it's the best. And then I think Halloween 2 is a really close second, but people aren't ready for that discussion.
Well, and it's unfortunate because each time, well, Halloween 2, Lords of Salem came after that, but like Lords of Salem was a failure, unfortunately, commercially, not artistically, and he kind of retreated it
made its budget back theatrically.
It barely got released. Like, I was very fortunate that it came out at like one theater near us, so Erica and I got to go see it theatrically, because otherwise we probably wouldn't have, because they kind of dumped it. But
yeah,
so he ends up retreating back and doing like 31 and 3 from Hell, and kind of going back to doing, okay, this is what people more or less expect out of me as Rob Zombie director. And like I said, I like 3 from Hell now. I still haven't totally turned a corner on 31, but
31 just bugs me because I've seen the better cut of that movie.
Yeah, that's right. You saw a longer version that was
at Sundance, and there was so much more character stuff in that movie where you really got to know Sherry's character, Jeff's character, and Meg Foster's characters more. And the way that they just butchered it, like, I got like very angry when I went and saw it for like the Fathom event, and I was so pissed. But yeah, I think Lords of Salem, like, it cost them about $1 million to make, and they made about $1 million.
Okay.
And so it's kind of broke even. It didn't, it wasn't a money maker, but I don't think it was a money loser.
Okay.
But ultimately you want to make money.
Right.
So what are you going to do? You're going to go back to the stuff that's going to make you money.
Right.
So
that's kind of what he did.
So thanks a lot, horror fans.
Is he doing the monsters or what?
I would love, I think he is. Here's the thing. I know for a fact that that's something he's been circling for years. Just in conversations I've had with some folks who've worked with him. I don't know that it's at the point where it should have been reported on, but I do know that he has been for years trying to do something with the Munsters.
It's just that original announcement read like fan casting.
Yeah. Yeah, that to me, like once the casting was, I was like, okay. Like him doing the Munsters doesn't seem crazy to me.
No, I agree with that.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to work out. But I mean, the revivals of the Addams Family, for better or for worse, you know, they've been successful.
Yeah.
The animated movie did well. They have an animated sequel coming out this year. There's also talk of them doing a Wednesday Addams series on Netflix, I think, with Christina Ricci.
Interesting.
Which I will definitely watch, where she's sort of more into like a Morticia Addams type role.
Okay.
Where she's like the matriarch of her own family now or whatever. That is intriguing to me. So, you know,
bring on Sherry Moon as Lily Munster. I'm into it.
I can't even imagine. Like people are already pissed at Nicole Kidman for being Lucille Ball. So I just can't even imagine,
right.
You know, I don't know. You're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't.
Yep.
So there you go.
All right. What is your number 6?
Well, I will jump into the movie that I slotted in after I realized you were doing Lords of Salem, and that gave me a little wiggle room. I chose the 2018 thriller What Keeps You Alive from Colin Minihan.
Okay. Interesting.
Yes. I absolutely love this movie. It's when somebody's saying that they're kind of looking for a really good, like, psychological thriller where you're not going to really be able to figure out what's going on at the beginning. Because sometimes like things are very telegraphed. This movie does not do that. And it can sort of bring something new to the table. And this one does it, I think, and does it incredibly well. Hannah Anderson and Brittany Allen are so freaking good in this movie. And it is as brutal as it is heartbreaking. It's so, and again, it's like, I don't want to talk. I want to talk about what happens.
Yeah, you can't really,
but I don't,
right?
because I know that there's probably a lot of people out there who haven't seen this one.
Yeah.
But if you haven't, I highly recommend it. To me, it was such a really great surprise of a movie. I've really enjoyed watching Colin's career sort of like evolve, because he was, you know, doing stuff with Stuart Ortiz. They were under the moniker of the Vicious Brothers. And it's funny because actually, I believe today or the day that this episode comes out, I believe we're going to see a little Grave Encounters coverage on our site, because that was the movie Derek picked for Indie Horror.
I was going to say, I know who's writing about that one.
Yes. But you know, the movie that really surprised me, like I was okay with the Grave Encounters movies, and Extraterrestrial wasn't my favorite. But you know what movie really surprised me also was It Stains the Sands Red.
Oh yeah, that was good.
Because like, one, zombies, we've seen so many zombies. How many more zombies do we need? And yet again, by sort of like taking the story elements down, like stripping them down to their bare bones and making it about characters, really makes that movie stand out. And in fact, I was for my honorable mentions, I was struggling between What Keeps You Alive and It Stains the Sands Red. Because I think they're both really fantastic. But yeah, I'm a big fan of Colin Minihan's. Apparently, he's supposed to be doing the new Urban Legend movie. I'm curious. I'd see it.
Sure.
I
will too, but I don't feel like we need a new Urban Legend movie, but sure.
We don't, but you know, it's going to happen.
Right.
You know, so what are you going to do? But yeah, I do highly recommend to anybody out there, if you haven't had a chance to see What Keeps You Alive, I really cannot recommend it enough. Like it blew me away. Like I love movies that can actually like stop me in my tracks, because sometimes like when you're watching movies, especially for a festival and you're on your like third or fourth screener of the day, like I still take notes during all my movies, but you kind of like mentally you relax a little bit. And this one, I remember watching it later in the day, and I think I'd watched 2 movies before it, and it snapped me back. like from that sort of moment of like being like, oh, okay, I'm just watching another movie. And then all of a sudden I was like, oh shit, okay, what is going on here? So yeah, it's really fantastic. I don't know if it's on Tubi though.
It is on Netflix. It's not on Tubi.
Okay.
But those of you who have a Netflix subscription should check it out.
Okay.
Next for me will not be a surprise to anyone who's followed any of my writing at Daily Dead. It is Jackson Stewart's Beyond the Gates.
I saved that one for you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Chase Williamson and Graham Skipper are both great as brothers who are sort of estranged from one another, who come together after their dad goes missing, basically, to put his affairs in order and pack up his video store. And they come across a VHS board game, which used to be a thing in the 80s, hosted by the great Barbara Crampton. And the board game is essentially haunted and weird things start to happen. And it's just really, really great. I've written about it before because I love that it is a weirdly like life affirming, warm hug of a horror movie, as opposed to some of the other movies we've been talking about have been very like unsettling, disturbing, upsetting.
Yeah, we got a lot of downers in this. I'm looking at my list and I'm like, oh, okay.
Is to be expected from horror. That's sort of the point of horror more often than not. But every once in a while, a movie like Beyond the Gates can kind of sneak through and end on a hug and make me cry. And that's what this movie did. And I still can't wait to see what Jackson does next.
Yeah, I was, as you know, a big fan of it as well. Some of us might actually be on the cover. I can't believe I got on the cover of that. I felt so bad. I'm sorry. I'm
no,
sorry.
I'm glad it's you.
Well, because I think I wrote like the interview, and didn't you do the? No, I did the review. Did I do a review?
You did the review. I think you did the review. I reviewed it for my site, but
okay, yeah, I did it at LA Film Festival. That's what it was. Yeah. Okay, but I was like, oh man. I was like, this is. I remember. I think I texted you afterwards. I was like, oh, you're gonna love this.
Yeah.
And I know there's certain movies when I watch them, I'm like, oh, this is going to be right in Patrick's alley. Yeah. And I knew that one was going to be one of them. And yeah, it was just really nice to see something totally different from Barbara, who again, isn't in the movie that much. And yet has such a presence about her. It becomes like this driving force in a way. In a very unusual way that I just really, really love. But yeah, that whole movie from top to bottom is just a lot of fun. And it has a really big heart to it.
Yeah.
Super fun, like special effects and stuff like that too. Maybe super nostalgic for, the old horror board games that you'd have to pop the VHS in and stuff. Yeah, I'm a big fan.
Yeah. It is sadly not streaming anywhere for free except for DirecTV, which I don't have DirecTV, but somebody might. But it is available to rent for about $3 anywhere you would rent a movie. And there's a really nice Scream Factory Blu-ray that I'm not on the commentary for.
I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I've never gotten to do a commentary on a Blu-ray. You have, so
I have. I've done a couple.
That makes you way cooler than me if you think about it, because people are listening to you. People don't give a shit about my words on a cover.
Nonsense.
So getting to hear you
just
talk
got quoted
about it
in the Mortal Kombat ad.
But it's not like I'm going to get to do the commentary for Mortal Kombat.
You don't know that. You might.
I doubt it. Plus, I think they just do bare bones releases, especially because of Warner Brothers.
They will be lucky if there's a Blu-ray at all.
Yeah, pretty much. So, all right. Well, I'll go into my next one, and this is it's funny because this is actually sort of a more uplifting, yet kind of a little bit sad too. I went with The Final Girls.
Oh, nice.
Yes, from Todd Strauss Schulson. I think this is one that a lot of indie or a lot of horror fans have sort of discovered. I think this one has some pretty good awareness amongst people. But again, I'm going to keep it vague just in case. But basically, it's a really fun twist on sort of the slasher formula that we all know and love. And it's just like Tessa Farmiga in that movie is so damn good. She's like her and Malin Ackerman together. Like, oh my gosh. Malin
Ackerman is
Like
the
good.
The MVP of that movie. Yeah.
And it's funny because here's the thing, like as much as I love Watchmen, I never loved Malin Ackerman in Watchmen. I just felt like she was a little miscast in that role. But this is the movie that made me realize that the problem with her performance in Watchmen wasn't her.
Okay.
You know what I mean? I think it was just the material wasn't right for her because there's such an interesting way that she does line delivery as a whole. I don't know how to explain it, but there's something where you're watching and you just know it's like her performance. I don't know how to explain it. But I really, really like her because she's always she popped up in a lot of like Adult Swim stuff, especially Children's Hospital, which I used to watch. But like, you know, she was in, you know, the original Harold and Kumar and stuff like that. And I've always been a really big fan of hers. But I think The Final Girls is like one of those movies where I was just like, oh, I really like her. So, but yeah, it was weird because like this was a movie that was made and then initially got picked up by New Line, and then New Line dropped it.
Oh.
And then ultimately, I think one of the Sony labels picked it up.
Okay.
So I had to make sure that it fit, but it did for Indie Horror Month because I was like, oh, because it was stage 6, and I was like, oh God, that's Sony. But they had actually picked it up after New Line had picked it up for distribution. But it was originally independently produced and financed and all that. So it's so tough these days, like trying to determine exactly just how independent something is. Because like realistically, like I don't think many people know that the original Resident Evil movie was an independent movie.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, because that was I forget what the company is, but the company bought the rights to Resident Evil from Capcom. And they produced it and then eventually sold it to Sony.
Okay.
So technically the first Resident Evil is an independent movie. It's all tricky. Believe me, I've done like so many deep dives and all this kind of stuff. It's crazy. But anyway, back to Final Girls. It's so good. I can't cry. I can't listen to Betty Davis' Eyes without crying. And I think anybody who's seen the movie feels the exact same way.
Yeah.
And it's like that whole, like, it's just such a real love letter to, I think, the stuff that we all grew up on and that sort of made us the horror fans that we are. And it's made in a way that feels like it's celebrating as opposed to poking fun or denigrating. And I think that idea of the joy that it has in it is what makes it like so enjoyable. That was a lot of joy.
Yeah. Angela Trimber has a really, really funny scene too, where she,
oh my gosh, yes,
does a bunch of drugs and goes crazy. But yeah, no, it's a good movie, and you know, it's always impressive when a movie can claim a song like that, especially one that's already established, like Betty Davis Eyes. But that's absolutely what this movie does. Yeah,
it's good stuff. I don't even know if it's streaming anywhere because I think it's even hard to find on Blu-ray.
It's streaming on Showtime if you have Showtime.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Well, like, what are you supposed to do with that?
Looking it up on Amazon. Yeah, I mean, you can rent it for $3. The Blu-ray appears to be about 15.
Okay, but that's not bad.
Yeah. But yeah, worth a rental if you don't mind spending $3. It's good. And
it's worth the $3. If you absolutely hate this movie, I will give you your $3 back.
Don't do it, man. Somebody's going to say they hate it just to get their $3.
Well, I'll run that risk, but I'm pretty confident.
My next pick is a Ty West movie that is The Innkeepers.
Nice. I had a feeling.
Yeah. Just made it because it's a 2011 movie. No, it is. Guess what? It's on Tubi.
It is. So, I think actually I put that on my list.
Okay.
For streaming.
Yeah, it's on Vudu and Tubi, so you have no excuse but to watch it. It is a horror comedy. It's going to be a little slow for some people because it's a Ty West movie. I happen to love it because I would watch this movie if it was just about Sarah Paxton and Pat Healy working in a hotel, I don't even need all the ghost stuff. I mean, I love all the ghost stuff, but like I just enjoy their interplay and their chemistry so much, and they're so funny together. That I would be happy to just watch this movie if it was just some like little slacker comedy about these two people working in an old hotel. But then you add a haunted backstory and some cool jump scares. And, you know, I've always argued that the movie is kind of a metaphor for these people who are stuck at this stage in their life. They don't know what they want to do. They don't really have a future. They are, you know, literally trapped in this hotel. Haunting it while they're still alive, just as these slacker employees. And Sarah Paxton is so great. I mean, she had a run there for a couple of years where she was doing all kinds of different stuff, and she's still working, I know, but she hasn't broken out the way I really hoped she would based on her work in like this and Cheap Thrills. She did like this 1-2 punch of those two performances are so funny.
It wasn't like Shark Night around the same time also? Shark Night 3D?
we don't talk about Shark Night.
Oh, but they rap at the end. I know. I'm just
yeah. Trust me, I wanted to like Shark Night because I'm a fan of David Ellis.
She is an enjoyable part of Shark Night.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, she's likable. You know, we talked about her when we talked about the Last House on the Left remake. She's always good, but my favorite performance of her is in The Innkeepers. Which also has an amazing one sheet because it's kind of basically the Fright Night poster, but it's a little bit different, but I love it.
It is.
I love this movie a whole lot.
I know. Didn't I send you like the vinyl?
I believe so.
Okay. I was like, wait, I think I did that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because when I saw The Innkeepers, it was the night after seeing Insidious. I don't think that did it a whole lot of favors.
No, probably not.
So I was a little underwhelmed. I liked the performances a lot, but it was like, oh, okay. But I'll tell you, when I went back and rewatched The Innkeepers and had that distance, loved it so much more.
Yeah.
So it's still not my favorite of the Ty West movies that he's put out, but I know why it is yours. And I, you know what I mean? Like I get it because like it's really charming. It's also got Kelly McGillis in it too, which is just like, yes. I don't know why we didn't have more. But anyway, like, I get it. Like, I get it now. Like, you know, cause I actually rewatched it finally, like a few years. It was on some channel on cable. So it was a while ago. Cause I actually still had cable. I don't think it was on Stars, but it was on like one of these like Encore channels or something like that. And I was really surprised because I was like, The Innkeepers is on cable. This might've been like 2016, 2017 ish. And I was really surprised at how much I enjoyed it the second time around. I think having the distance, which is why I like when movies don't work for me, I never completely write them off unless there's something really offensive about them to me. That just doesn't click with my sensibilities. But if something I'm just kind of like, oh, okay. Like I will always do a rewatch eventually because I want to like re-gauge my reactions to it. Because you just never know. Like sometimes you'll watch a movie and you're just not in the mood for it. So it's not going to click. And then you watch it again a year later and you're like, oh my God, that was amazing.
Yeah.
And I've had that happen so many times.
Yeah, me too. I will almost never give up on a movie.
Yeah, very few have I actually given up. I've only ever walked out on one that I've covered. So,
can I ask which one?
I don't want to say because there's like
I understand.
LA people involved and stuff.
Ew. Well, you'll have to tell me after we record.
Yes, but it was just. I left Vegas early to go to see this movie, and I was really mad because I could have stayed in Vegas for 2 more days.
Oh my gosh! Now I have to hear what this movie is.
Yeah. Anyway, we'll move on to my next movie, which is a good movie.
Sure. Your number 4. My
number 4 is The Invitation from Karan Kusama.
Very nice. I knew that would be on here somewhere.
Yes. I love movies about cults. I love sort of weird dinner party movies. You put those things together in one movie and I'm going to love it. I think Logan Marshall Green is fantastic in this movie. I've actually never really seen a performance from him that I haven't totally enjoyed.
Yeah, I feel like this was the movie where I turned a corner on him because for me, for a long time, he was just like that guy from the OC.
Yeah, which I get, but he was fine on the OC because he was like Ryan's older brother, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was fine, but he was caught up in all the like Misha Barton dying and it just all the
yeah.
That show was in the toilet by the time he was on, and it kind of recovered in its last season, but it was, kind of too little too late. And again, it's not his fault. He was playing the part that he was hired to play. But for me, he was like just another pretty boy. And then I saw The Invitation and I was like, oh, wait, no, he's actually way more interesting. And then obviously, whatchamacallit, Upgrade. Yeah, really was like, holy shit, this guy's awesome.
Yeah. There's the moment, I think it's when he goes into his son's room.
Yeah.
And lays down on the bed.
Yeah.
And that to me, I was like, that was it. That was like the moment. And I was like, oh, this dude is like really good. And then you have John Carroll Lynch in here, who like, he is the guy. He's actually in another movie that made my honorable mentions, but he's the guy who like, he's been known, he's the guy from Fargo. He used to be on the Drew Carey show as me.
Yeah, but he's also the Zodiac killer.
Right. And he's also Twisty from American Horror Story.
I never saw that season, but.
Yeah. But like, he is so good at like character work and every single thing that he does. Like American Horror Story 84, very mixed, all over the place. It was actually the first American Horror Story season I watched, but I was like, well, there's no way.
That one as well. Yeah.
I was like, there's no way I'm missing this. And again, it goes into some really weird and crazy directions. But his character in that season in particular is just so sad. And he's so good in it that that immediately made me like that season better, despite all of its sort of wild tonal shifts. And I don't even know.
American Horror Story, really? Tonal shifts?
I can't even say because I never really watch it. Again, I'm really bad with TV, but I was like, there was no way I'm missing the slasher season of American Horror Story. Yeah. And then it goes supernatural because why not? So I was expecting werewolves to show up at a certain point too. Or
would not have been a surprise.
I know. But yeah, if nothing else, the speech that John Carroll Lynch gives in that movie is worth watching the movie alone on just that moment.
Yeah.
But I think it's such it's this sort of meditation on grief, sort of adults trying to figure out like, what do you do in the wake of something like that and how different those paths can be. And then ultimately turns into this sort of totally, I don't even want to say over the top because then I feel like it's selling it as camp. But like, it just goes into this like full blown horror mode. You're like, what is happening? And then you get that final shot, which I won't say, but it was just like, holy shit, this movie is fantastic.
That's a great final shot.
Yeah. And Karen Kusama is a genius. I can't wait to see what she does with Dracula. And I am ready for that.
Did you like her segment in XX?
I'm trying to remember which one hers was.
Hers was the last one about the woman with her son.
I think hers might have been one of the ones. I liked hers a lot, and I liked the one.
The box. Right?
Yes.
The Ivanka Vukovic one, where they look in the box, and then it's the first and the last segment in that movie are really strong, and then the middle kind of is not as good.
Yeah. But actually, I mean, I even liked Destroyer to a degree.
Yeah, Destroyer, I think, just suffered from like.
It's just a downer experience altogether.
And it's like maybe just a few too many cop movie cliches. Like I've seen so many cop movies that I was like, all right, this is all pretty familiar. But I mean, she did good work.
But, and again, it's just Nicole Kidman acting her ass off. So,
right.
With Bucky. When Bucky shows up and I was like, whoa.
Right.
I was like, okay, this is interesting. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, again, The Invitation is one that's probably was talked about a lot between like 2015 and 2016, but I don't hear it talked about enough today. So,
yeah.
So, so there might be people out there who haven't seen it.
It is streaming on Netflix.
All right.
So while you're there to watch,
Blackcoat's Daughter. And What Keeps You Alive.
And What Keeps You Alive. That's right. Then you can also watch The Invitation, which is well
I might be
worth
sending
your
people
time.
back to Netflix down the line too again. We'll see.
Okay, let us see. My number 4 is I think probably our biggest disagreement. It's the one that you are going to be in least support of because It Follows.
Yeah.
I still think It Follows is great.
I know. That's actually not the movie I thought you were going to say. So.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I'm curious to see if this one shows up or not. I'd be really surprised if it didn't. Anyway. Yeah, I get it. But you talk about it because I want to.
No, I mean, there's not much to say about it. It was kind of an indie horror sensation.
Sorry.
No, there's plenty to say about it. I just think it's an impressive piece of filmmaking. I recognize that like not all the rules make sense and I don't need them to, because the movie puts me in such a state of mind and then keeps me there for 90 minutes. I just think it's such a well-made movie, and I saw the director's follow-up, Welcome to Silver Lake, and I didn't like it.
You mean Under the Silver Lake?
Under the Silver Lake, sorry. I didn't like it nearly as much as It Follows. I kind of wish he had gone back to make another horror movie, but he was one of those guys that was like,
I don't want to be a horror director.
Yeah, kind of shit on horror a little bit while he was out promoting It Follows.
Those are my favorites.
Yeah, isn't that great? By the way, Joe Bob Briggs was kind of giving it to Eli Roth for saying that. And I've never heard Eli Roth say that. Eli Roth has always been a guy who seems very proud to be a horror director.
I mean, he hosts a TV show about horror right. as a genre, like it's like to discuss it in depth. Like
I've never heard him try to distance himself from horror.
I mean, maybe he tried to a little bit with the House with the Clock in its Walls, but I don't really think so. I mean, he's always produced horror movies. Like I've never heard him
right
do that. So, all right. Yeah, I was a little surprised by that. I was like, when did that become a thing? But he was actually a really fascinating guest. I was kind of expecting a much different discussion from them, but it actually went into some deep places, which I thought was interesting.
I really liked it. I thought he was super interesting.
Yeah.
I just think It Follows is a really, really well-made horror movie that it feels, how do I say this? While I was watching it, it felt very original. The movie itself is actually pretty derivative. It's actually borrowing from a couple of different things pretty liberally. But I thought the actual construction of it was so well done that it really hooked me. And I still think it belongs on the list.
You know what? If we were talking about like sort of these bigger independent movies that have come along, you have to mention it. Like it's because it was a really big moment.
There's another big one that is not on my list that I feel bad about not having on my list. Maybe that's
it's not on my list either. I know what you're talking about.
Okay.
But like I'm to be really honest, I'm still the most shocked out of anybody that it didn't work for me.
Sure.
That being said, I own it, and one day eventually I will get back to it because I want to give it another shot.
I haven't gone back to rewatch it
because, like, for me, that just seems like it's so in my wheelhouse that when I was done and I didn't like it, I was really like, I kind of just sat there in a stupor, like, what? Like, what just happened?
Yeah.
Like, because it's so me. Like, it is a me type movie. Like, first of all, it's festival bait, you know, and I love it. I can't get enough of it. And it's like riffing on a lot of like movies and themes and stuff that I really adore. And that's still like mathematically, this movie should work for me. And I don't know why it didn't. So I'll get back to it, one of these days. So I have the Blu-ray, so I'll always have the opportunity. But yeah, I don't know what went wrong there, other than me being able to actually talk right.
It is not surprisingly streaming on Tubi. It is also on Shudder, actually, which is I think the first movie that we've talked about that's on Shudder.
Oh, which is strange.
Yeah,
that is strange.
Yeah.
All right. Well, my next movie is sort of a cheat, a little bit.
Okay.
Because it's sort of the first movie and its sequel, but you kind of can't talk about one without talking about the other. And I went with Creep and Creep 2.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yes, these are some like the Creep and Creep 2 are sort of like my fun found footage movies to come back to and rewatch like every October. There's something, again, when I heard the concept of what it was, and I just kind of like, oh, really? I was like, well, how good could this possibly be? And then I saw it, and then I was like, holy shit. And then, like, as much as I liked Creep, I actually love Creep 2 more, because I think Creep 2 really amps up the head games in it in some really fascinating and unexpected ways. And I think they're prime examples of what exactly you would want out of a good independent horror movie, where you have somebody who's basically just relying on very basic resources, just making it about character and just doing something that can like ultimately stick with you once you're done. And for me, like the first time watching that movie, there's a lot of really great set pieces. We always joke whenever we have to, because Winnie, we have to cut her hair all the time. And then we have to give the dogs baths and stuff. So we always talk about tubby time. So that's been a Creep takeaway for us, where it was like, oh, it's tubby time. But I still can never get out of my head that imagery from the end of it with the axe. And again, I'm just saying that is right. In general,
right?
Because it's so crazy, freaky, the way that it's just set up and how it works, and then how it plays into the sequel. It's like, to me, I think Patrick Brice did a fantastic job with just doing something that, you know, when, especially at a time when quote unquote found footage was like becoming sort of a punchline in the genre.
Yeah.
And amongst fans, that it came back and showed that there is power in that kind of structure with your storytelling.
Yeah, if you do something kind of innovative with it, you know, if you're resourceful, as you pointed out, if you have characters who are worth following, because so often I think in a lot of found footage, that's part of the problem, is the characters tend to be kind of shrill and disposable. In a lot of the found footage I've seen, not all found footage, but Creep is like, you can't get enough of Mark Duplass. You want to keep watching him and seeing more of him. He's that movie's best special effect.
He is. And then when you get to the sequel, because then you have this woman played by Desiree Akhavan, who like basically comes in there to challenge him, which totally shifts the power dynamic. And the way that it all unfolds between them is so genuinely unnerving from the start, because like it's, you know, and it's funny because I have Tyranny Isles on right now just to muddle out sound for the dogs from people outside, but like it's like the bomb theory where like, you know, she's walking into this really dangerous situation and you know it's messed up and you know who she's around, because we've already established that with the first movie. And yet what happens is nothing how you would expect it to go. And then it becomes sort of this back and forth between the characters, because she herself is very unfettered. Like she's going to do this, and she's putting herself out there in really bold ways. I loved the way that they were able to change that dynamic. I thought it was brilliant. Also, I love the fact there's like that shot of Mark Duplass in the hot tub, which looks like it's straight out of the Fiona Apple Criminal video. I love that image so much. I was just like, it just makes you feel dirty when you see it. Cause like there's something wrong there, but you can't look away. And I really want a third. I know that they were working on it. But I don't know at what point in the process they are, especially with everything that happened last year. But those movies to me, I think, brought sort of the legitimacy back in favor in terms of found footage. Like, I think people were like, oh, I guess there's still ways to do found footage that doesn't feel like hokey or anything like that. So,
well, and it captured the imaginations of horror fans. I mean, there's like Creep t-shirts and
Cabby colors,
and like
I wanted to get one of the Wolfie t-shirts and I never got a chance to do it. So
for a 2-person found footage movie, that's saying something.
Yeah, the image of him with the wolf mask on, where he's like in front of the door doing the dance,
Mm-hmm.
like Jesus Christ! Like again, you just have a guy with like a camera, like that's it,
Right.
you know. And those movies are just so unforgettable. I love them.
Yeah.
So, all right, what's next on your list?
Next for me is We Are Still Here.
I knew that was going to be on there
feature,
too.
Yeah, from Ted Gagan, starring Barbara Crampton and Larry Fessenden. Very much influenced by Italian horror like Lucio Fulci. Joe Bob Briggs, we were just talking about, showed The House by the Cemetery a couple weeks ago on his debut episode, and you could watch that movie and draw pretty much a straight line to We Are Still Here.
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, the first time I saw it, I liked it. I didn't love it, but it stuck in my head so much that I had to watch it again. And by the end of that year, it was my favorite horror movie of that year. I mean, it speaks to a lot of things that I love in horror. I think the climax goes for broke in a pretty spectacular way. I think
Barbara's so fun to watch in those moments too.
Yeah. I mean, she's so good in the whole movie, you know, again, as this grieving mother. I think she's pretty fantastic. Larry Fessenden is always fun to have in a movie. Lisa Marie shows up. She's fun to have in there.
She's fun, but I'll tell you what, she's not fun to go watch a movie with.
Oh, no.
Because I think for me, it took my second viewing for that movie to click with me, because I was sitting near them at the premiere at South by, and she talked through the whole movie.
Oh, that sucks.
And it was like, I was just so taken out of the whole experience from that. I was super bummed out, but I think Ted did a fantastic job. I don't know why we're not 10 films deep into Ted's career right now.
It's pretty surprising. Yeah. I mean, I didn't like Mohawk as much as We Are Still Here, but I really liked Mohawk.
Yeah.
And I would love to see more from him.
Yeah. So get on that universe.
Come on now. Another great poster too.
Oh, so good.
Love it.
Actually, it's funny. It sort of reminds me a lot of ways with just like the color palette and stuff of the Innkeepers.
Yeah.
And sort of like that calming blue that makes you think that like everything's okay. But then they got the wispy,
right.
The wispy font. And you're like, oh, things are bad.
And it's streaming on Tubi, believe it or not.
Woo woo.
Or Prime if you don't want to watch ads.
Yes. So, all right. Well, my next movie, I think, again, is going to take us back to Netflix. I know. Here we go. So my next movie is Robert Eggers' The Witch, or The Vivitch. The Vivitch, if you're a purist and you want to put the double
V's.
If
you're a douche.
Well, I'll be the douche then. No,
This is only on Showtime, by the way.
Oh my God, they took it off of Netflix?
Or Canopy if you use Canopy. But yeah, it's not on Netflix.
Can I just really quick, I don't know if you've ever used Canopy, because that's run through like your public library systems. Yeah. Holy shit, that is like, I watched a bunch of stuff through Canopy last year, especially once we got rid of TV for a while. And you can like watch, I think it's 4 movies a week you can stream on there, but it's totally free and it's really good quality. So anybody with a library card can watch anything on Canopy, and library cards are free. So I highly recommend anybody out there, if you're looking for more streaming options and you just don't necessarily want to be paying for them, Canopy is your best friend.
Yeah.
And then also a lot of libraries now too, you could actually rent movies and they'll send you discs almost like Netflix, which I think they started adopting because of the pandemic. Because libraries were closed. So anyway, that's my pitch on Canopy, but I discovered it like how great it was last year. And was really surprised. It was the reason I got a library card.
Okay.
So, because I never get to a library. I just, I'm like, oh, do I want to read something? I guess I'll just buy it on Amazon or whatever.
I use it for my film class that I teach. That's how the students watch their movies.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah.
Look at you, teacher.
That's me.
All right. But yeah, I mean, The Witch is one, obviously, I think is probably the second most talked about movie on my list. My most talked about will be coming up next. But I absolutely love this movie. It's held up so well. I finally got to get Brian to sit down and watch it with me because I just knew that he would really dig the New Englandiness and the old timiness. And he was he wanted to watch it again as soon as we were done. Cause he was like, holy shit. Like he was totally blown away by it. I mean, we've all fallen in love with Black Phillip. We all want to live deliciously now, I think is what we've discerned. And it's, I know Eggers has done other things. I still, I know there's the witch in the lighthouse. Everybody kind of fell over each other for the lighthouse. I still love the witch.
Me too.
I appreciate the lighthouse, but I love the witch.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know that I probably will ever watch the lighthouse again.
Right.
But I appreciate it. I love what they did there. Cool. But I'll go back to the witch time and time again. And Anya Taylor-Joy is just brilliant. And there's a reason that she's had the career that she's had. And we see it exemplified, in this movie. Is exemplified the right word? I don't know.
I think it might be.
Making sense? I don't know anymore.
Who could tell?
We've been on it for like 6 hours, so who knows? Yeah. But I mean, we knew that, we both have 10 movies. What are we gonna do?
Right.
So anyway, the Witch is
the witch. Yeah, good one. All right, my number 2 is another one of my favorite horror movies from the year it came out, and that is Kevin Kolsch and Dennis Widmeyer's Starry Eyes.
That is on my honorable mentions because I had a feeling it was probably going to show up in your list.
Yeah, I just love it. Alex Esso gives like a tour de force performance as a young woman living in Hollywood working at like a Hooters type restaurant called Taters. She's a Taters girl, and she wants to break into show business and kind of makes a deal with the devil in order to do it. And it was funny because I saw the movie once at a festival and really loved it, but was watching it as a movie about this poor innocent girl who is corrupted by evil forces, sort of against her will. And then I watched it again at home on Blu-ray, and I was like, oh no, this movie's about an awful girl who will do anything to get ahead, and who makes this deal, and it brings out all this darkness and evil that was already inside of her. And I think the movie works either way, but the fact that I saw it that way the second time made me appreciate Alex Esso's performance even more.
Yeah.
Because she's playing a victim, but she is not a victim. She is a participant in everything that happens to her. And it is a hell of a movie, and makes me all that much more disappointed by Pet Sematary, but I don't need to compare the two movies. I just was so excited for their follow-up, and I did not love Pet Sematary, but man, do I love Starry Eyes.
I mean, I liked Pet Sematary, but I love Starry Eyes.
Yeah.
So, but according to some people, all of us critics who liked it were bought off anyway. So,
oh, well, there you go.
Yeah. So, what are you going to do about it? Yeah, no, that to me was like, that's the performance that you put on your reel, and like doors are just going to open for you.
Yeah.
And also like, now my other dog is barking. But also she ends up like, what is really interesting to me about her career is like, she then goes on eventually to play Wendy
Torrance. Yeah.
In Dr. Sleep, and her portrayal in that movie of essentially a character that's already been that's become iconic through another actress's performance, but yet she nails it, but then it never feels like she's ripping it off. Right. I can't describe it properly because my brain is broken at this point, but like I remember rewatching Dr. Sleep, I think it was in January, and I was just so struck because like you kind of, because you're in the present and her stuff's in the past, you tend to focus on the present stuff. So like this was like my 4th or 5th viewing of Dr. Sleep. And I was really honing in on like the stuff that she was doing. I was like, Jesus, she is good.
She's like, really good.
Yeah. So I'm just waiting for that one moment where like all of a sudden everybody in this world is going to know who the hell Alex Esso is and why she is such a force. Yeah. We all know, but I'm ready for the world to know because she is so freaking good. And I love the fact that the first time I saw Starry Eyes was with a double feature with Possession.
Interesting. And I could see that definitely.
Yeah. And that was like a totally mind F of an evening. Cause that was the first time I ever saw Possession.
Oh boy.
So I walked out of that theater, like my legs were all wobbly. I was like, what did I just go through?
Was that like a Beyond Fest thing?
It was. Yeah.
Okay.
So, it was a really good time, but yeah, she really gives everything to Starry Eyes. And again, I think you're totally accurate with how you sort of picked up on what the real thing that's going on in that movie. Because again, I think the first time you see it, you're like, oh, but she's so nice and she's talking to Noah Segan, and you know, I mean, who you know, she's being nice to Noah Segan, so she has to be a nice person. And then you're like, oh no, she's just manipulating everything the entire time.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a really interesting movie. I think it's one of these movies that I think you can watch it and like you can almost recontextualize it with every viewing. There's just like so many different facets to it that I find really interesting. And it pretty much is a really accurate depiction of living in Los Angeles, even if you're not an actor. We're all assholes out here, I think is what I'm getting at. If there's anything to take away from it, is that everybody in LA is an asshole, myself included. Yeah, it's fine. I own it.
Starry Eyes, guess what? Streaming on Tubi.
All right.
We're not just doing an ad for Tubi. Really, we're just saying that Tubi has a lot of great indie horror.
They do. They really do. All right. Are we ready?
We're at number 1, the big one.
All right. I mean, this is probably pretty expected. But my number 1 is Hereditary.
Yes.
I still remember everything about that first time seeing Hereditary, which again, I think is why it stuck with me. But then getting to see it again and again with other people and having similar reactions just makes it like so much more like memorable to me. And I'm going to be really honest. I like Midsommar. I'm tired of hearing about Midsommar. Every single week, somebody's got a new something or other about themes in Midsommar. Now we're going to fight about the boyfriend. Did he deserve what he got? Did he consent? Of course he didn't consent. So does that make her evil? But she's just going from one.
Can I just say this one thing?
Yeah.
This argument about whether or not he deserves it. Deserves got nothing to do with it. It
still happens, right?
It's a horror movie. People don't deserve the things that happen to them in horror movies.
Yeah, not every person who gets killed in a slasher movie deserves to die.
Right. The point wasn't like, well, he cheated, so he deserved what happened to him. The point is, it's a horror movie. Anyway.
I think most people in that instance took up the fact that if some people interpreted it as a celebratory moment, when it really isn't, if you think about it, and that's the real horror. Anyway, let's go to Hereditary because I'm just so over Midsommar. But for me, Hereditary, like I was absolutely stunned the first time I saw this movie. And yes, Ari Aster is a filmmaker who very much wears his influences on his sleeve, and he makes no bones about it. I don't think he's ever tried to hide the fact. But he's also never shirked away from the idea that he's a horror film director either. So there you go. And I just remember sitting in that theater at Sundance, and I was sitting with Sam Zimmerman from Shudder, and he was wearing a very nice sweater too. I remember it was like a cream color. I still remember his sweater because he always has great sweaters when I run into him at Sundance. And we were sitting in front of these two guys who, the minute the head scene happens, these guys both almost in unison, like one of them crouched down and like put his head in his hands, and the other one tucked his legs up underneath, like up to his chest. Right, and like was hugging his legs against his chest in his chair. And like the whole time they're just like, and they were very verbal with like how they were reacting. Like there was like another scene when Toni Collette's on the ceiling and they're like, no. And it was just, it was such a perfect screening. But that movie really blew me away. Like to me, you know, I mean, obviously there's a really fun genre elements, but again, it's sort of this movie about death and about what family legacies are, and sort of these things this weight that comes with the people that we ultimately just end up connected to through no fault of our own. Like, you know, we could have the worst family members ever, but we're still connected to them because we share blood with them. You know, and it's just, you know, to see how that all unfolds. And Hereditary is a movie that's, of course, been talked about so much too. So I don't want to say too much because, like, who cares at this point? And I don't think anybody listening to this hasn't watched Hereditary at this point either. But it absolutely astonished me. I think it came along at this time where I needed something to kind of reawaken something in me, and it did. And I do think it probably has one of the best performances in horror of the last 10 years with Toni Collette.
Definitely.
And I also think Alex Wolff is fantastic too. I had just seen him in My Friend Dahmer. And he really blew me away in that. And then I see him in this and I was like, oh my God, this kid is like absolutely fantastic. And then a few months later shows up in Jumanji.
Right.
Like
Right.
what a career that kid, like
Yeah.
Alex was having in like the course of a year and a half to go from those three very different movies. But he is hella talented. So, but yeah, so mine is Hereditary.
Hereditary is awesome. That was my favorite horror movie of the year it came out. I think it was my favorite movie period the year it came out. It's amazing.
Yeah. So what's your number one?
My number one, my favorite indie horror movie of the last decade is Lucky McKee's The Woman.
Interesting. There's a movie that I am shocked isn't on here, but we could talk about that later.
Sure.
Okay.
Again, we only had room for 10 and I'm sure I forgot stuff. So you're going to say what it was and I'm going to say, God damn it. Why didn't I put that on here? But yeah, The Woman is not an easy watch. It's essentially, I don't know. I mean, do I need to talk? Sean Bridgers plays a guy who finds a woman. I mean, it's sort of a loose sequel to what the hell is that movie called?
Goodness gracious. This is what happens when you've been talking for 4 hours, kids. Oh, gosh.
Not a movie I'm crazy about. The one that comes before this. I'm trying to look it up right now. I'm sorry.
I am too, so we can kind of.
Offspring.
Yes. Sorry. Yes.
I'm not crazy about Offspring. I read the book. I liked the book, the Jack Ketchum book. I wasn't crazy about the movie, but so The Woman is sort of a loose sequel to that. And again, I lucked out that it was showing at a theater near me for about a week, and I went to see it knowing nothing and was just so blown away by, we've talked about great performances in our last couple of movies with Alex Esso and with Toni Collette. Pollyanna McIntosh in The Woman is giving a tour de force for the ages.
Yeah.
She's so good. Everybody in the movie is so good. Angela Bettis is so good, and Lauren Ashley Carter is so good, and Sean Bridgers is so good at being like the world's biggest creep. He finds a woman in the woods and decides to chain her up in his shed to domesticate her, and things do not go as planned. Like I said, it's hard to watch. There are trigger warnings galore, but it is very rewarding and very, very good. Lucky McKee is doing some really challenging stuff, I think. And I just think it's a masterpiece. I think it's so good. I think it's a messy masterpiece, but I think it's a masterpiece.
Yeah, it is the movie that sort of made me sit up and take notice of Lucky McKee.
Didn't May? How did May not do that?
Here's the thing. I actually saw May around the same time.
Oh, okay. Well, that would
so
explain.
I didn't see May like when it first came out in the early 2000s.
Yeah.
Like I was a little bit late to that party. Admittedly, sorry. But so it was like, I think I watched May. Actually, I think I watched May right before covering this.
Oh, okay.
And then I went back and I watched The Woods.
Yeah, I like The Woods, actually.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. Yeah, it was one of those, like, I can't believe that I missed May when it first kind of was making the rounds, because we used to rent like everything at like Family Video, because like they had way more than like Blockbuster did back then. So like I can't imagine, like I rented Strangeland. I can't imagine I didn't rent this, but for some reason I didn't.
Howdy.
Yes, I rented Captain Howdy from frickin' Family Video of all places. So, but yeah, I think Lucky is an incredibly talented filmmaker. And I also love how Pollyanna like took the legacy of this character and carried it on through Darlin.
Yeah.
Which I think isn't a perfect movie. But I think the stuff that it gets really right.
Yeah, there's a lot of good stuff in there.
Yeah. But I love how that sort of then became like this thing for Pollyanna.
Mm-hmm.
Because so many times like actresses sort of become known for like these certain specific roles. And then like, that's how people see them. And I like that she was able to do that, but in a way that then ultimately transitioned her into the world of directing. which I think is pretty cool. So
yeah, definitely.
So yeah.
The Woman is streaming on Shudder, but is not on Tubi.
Oh, okay. I'm shocked.
Yeah, me too.
Shocked, Tubi.
Come on, Tubi, get it together. It's also on the Arrow streaming service, but I don't know anybody who has that yet.
I do.
Oh, you do?
I did. I got the 30-day free trial. I think I'm just going to keep it because there's actually reason I got it initially was because I was doing the episode with Travis Stevens and he wanted to talk about The Bloodhound, and that was the one movie out of the movies that we talked about that I hadn't seen. And I was like, all right, I'll go over to Arrow and give it a shot. And I actually really like their service because they have all the special features and stuff on it too.
Okay.
And it's really it's just more than the movies.
Right.
And they've curated a lot of really cool extra stuff and short films and things like that that are really interesting.
Well, cool.
That is a little step further than you see from a lot of the streamers.
Right.
Which I appreciate. They don't have the biggest selection, but they've got a pretty good selection. Yeah. Like, I think most of the stuff that they would have on there, you probably already own. But I think if you're trying to keep up with some of their newer titles, it's like $5 a month.
Okay.
So it's pretty reasonably priced. Or you can pay for the year for $50.
Oh, that's not bad.
No, not at all. So,
all right, honorable mentions, lady.
All right. Well, I'm not going to mention the ones that we already talked about, but I did have The Sacrament on there. So that was my Ty West movie.
Interesting.
Yes. Again, a cult movie is just really draw me in. And I mean, it's AJ Bowen and Amy Simons. Like, come on, and Ty West. What do you think I'm going to do? I also had The Devil's Candy on there as well.
That's a good one.
That's, again, really fantastic performances. I also had Raw.
Oh, very nice.
Which now that it's getting Blu-ray release, I'm hoping more people will be able to kind of catch up with that.
Yeah, I thought about putting that on here, but I knew that I would need to rewatch it and didn't feel like renting it. So
yeah, but I think it just got a Blu-ray release, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe you're right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Scream Factory, right?
Yes, and then it also got a really fun, like, extensive release in the UK as well.
Oh, okay.
I think from 88 films over there?
That's a UK label, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's who did it over there.
Okay.
I also had I had two Mike Flanagans. I had Absentia and Hush.
Nice.
Because Hush was actually bought at South by, so it technically fit. I also had Stage Fright, not the original Stage Fright, but the Meatloaf,
the musical
Driver
one. I love that one.
I love that movie so much.
Yeah.
I also had Berberian Sound Studio on there as well.
I haven't seen that one.
Oh, from Peter Strickland?
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Oh, I think you'd really like that.
Yeah.
Because it's a guy who basically has to go in and do all of the sound design for like a Giallo movie. And it starts to mess with his head. With Toby
Jones.
Yes. Really great performance in it. So yeah, I'm surprised you haven't seen that.
Yeah.
I also had The Collection on my list.
Okay.
I also had Bliss. Joe Begos.
Yeah, thank you. I couldn't place what the hell it was.
It's okay. When you have like the single title, sometimes you're like,
right,
what?
Right. What's Bliss again? I'm thinking of Spring.
Yeah. Again, I was going to put Spring on. Here's the thing for me, like the Gas Money Kids, Resolution, The Endless, Spring, they're not straight horror.
Right.
So I didn't put them on here, but I put all of their movies on here pretty much.
Okay.
Because I just adore them so much as filmmakers. I also have Under the Shadow.
Oh, very nice.
Because I don't really care for the Babadook.
Which is the one that I thought one of us, I knew you wouldn't have it. And I was like, I probably should have it.
Yeah, that's what I figured. So that movie, I just thought Under the Shadow did it a little more assuredly, but I send your hate mail my way, kids. It's fine. I also had John Dies at the End.
Nice.
Which again was sort of genre adjacent, so I didn't quite do it. But Don Coscarelli, who I love.
Yeah.
I also had VHS 2 on here because out of the whole VHS series, it's my favorite.
It's the best one.
It really is. Holy shit.
Yeah.
I know people are going to make fun of me, but I also had Tusk.
Oh, okay.
So I rewatched that last October. I hadn't watched it in years, and I still really love that movie, and it still breaks my heart. I get the Johnny Depp stuff is weird and it feels very idiosyncratic, but it bugs me less now than it did back then.
Right. Yeah, I would understand that. No, that is a very singular movie. I have nothing bad to say about it.
Yeah. And then I also had Thelma, which was again, it was sort of genre adjacent, but it's very sort of in the vein of Carrie. It was from Norway.
Yeah, I did see that.
Yeah, I really liked that movie a lot. And I think especially what the budget that they had and what they were doing with that movie, they really kicked it up a notch in terms of what I was expecting out of it. I also had Tragedy Girls, which the only reason I didn't have it on this list is because I've literally talked about Tragedy Girls to death. I just did an episode with Emily a few months ago. So I was like, nobody needs to hear me talk about Tragedy Girls again. I also did the same with Your Next, which was
I didn't know if Your Next was an indie. It was. They got paid. Okay. Yeah, it premiered at TIFF, and then they had a big bidding war over it, which is what Lionsgate then won. So really, that should have been on my list somewhere because I love that movie.
I do too, and it's amazing. But again, I've also sort of talked about it quite a bit this month with like Barbara and stuff like that. So I was like, everybody knows You're Next. I'm also surprised you didn't have Mandy on your list.
That was another one. I just wasn't sure if it was an indie or not. So
yes, totally was.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then I also had Suspiria 2018.
Okay.
But again, I've talked about that movie so much. I was just like, nobody needs to hear that. And then again, Tucker versus Dale. Right. I've already talked about that a ton. I was like, all right, I'm just going to focus on 100 Bloody Acres. And another one was The Void, which isn't a perfect movie by any means. And again, it's a movie that really wears its influences on its sleeve.
Yeah.
But I've revisited that movie more than I thought I would over the years. And
it's really, every time I watch it, I really want to love it. And I'm not there yet. I maybe someday.
Yeah, I get it. Because the first time I saw it, I was a little underwhelmed.
Yeah.
But the more time that I've spent with it, I'm like, oh, okay.
It's super interesting and the effects are great.
Yeah. And then the last one I had was just because it came out last year. So I was like, well, does it qualify? But it probably does. And we talked about it just a hair earlier, but it was Possessor.
Oh, sure.
But that just leaves me to have the next 10 years to talk about Possessor.
Yeah, really.
So.
Well, that's a lot of movies for everybody to go out and watch.
Yeah. So, for anybody who says, oh, they're not doing anything interesting when it comes to indie horror these days, you're wrong. You're very, very wrong.
Here's like 30 movies that would disagree with you.
I know. I've already seen a handful of movies this year that I'm just like, oh, yeah, this has some real potential to end up on my favorites list at the end of the year. So,
yeah, definitely.
It's again, it's like I'm excited to go see Candyman and Spiral and watch Michael Myers wreak havoc in Haddonfield again. But let's just try to not forget about some of the other movies along the way.
What's one off the top of your head that you would recommend to wrap us up?
Seance.
That's coming out soon, right?
It is from Simon Barrett. I don't know that I'm technically under embargo, but I will say big fan.
Okay.
And that's where I'll leave it.
Very nice. I will recommend a movie that I saw, I feel like last year. Didn't it play Fantasia last year? And it finally just got a release called For the Sake of Vicious.
Yes.
A Canadian siege movie that's awesome.
That's another one that really surprised me, especially because I know it was made on a micro budget.
Yeah.
But again, because it's so character driven, that it doesn't feel like a small movie, and then it just like goes bananas.
And then you're like, title.
Oh, it does. Like it definitely earns the title Vicious. It's a good time.
Yeah.
So yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys so much for listening. Heather, thanks for talking about all these movies with me.
Thank you. Are you kidding? And thank you. And again, just everybody out there, thank you for supporting Indie Horror Month. We really appreciate it. Tell us if there's any movies that you love that we didn't even mention, because there's so many out there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure you guys are listening just angry that we forgot stuff. And so take to Twitter at Corpse Club, at Daily Dead News, at The Horror Chick, and tell us all the movies that we forgot that you love. And let's keep talking about indie horror all year long. Thanks to Brian for getting the show ready. And again, thanks to all of you for listening. Until next time, stay scary.